Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to spend a few words wrapping up the KZ ZSX, kind of give you my final words on that. But first, let's kind of run through some news since last video, which was probably a day or two ago. So last time we talked about the KZ E10, which at the time wasn't formally announced by KZ, but it showed up on a couple resellers. But since then, now it's official. Now it's $10 cheaper than what the guys were selling it for before it was announced, so that's a good thing. No reviews. I think it's shipping. It's not shipping until October, so looks super cool. I love the gray. I actually like the white too, but probably put it on my 11/11 list. Probably wait it out until someone reviews it, and but right now I'm not dropping $60 on it to try that. But in related news, we talked about my Galaxy Buds, I think last time. I thought about, well, I should go buy the E10s to go replace these guys because they'll sound better. But then I ran across this review from Critical, who's a super well-respected reviewer, and he's like, well, here's my ranking list of all the TWSs out there, and the Samsungs were number 2. Number 1 is, of course, Sony's, and those are about double the price of those. So these are a low 100, maybe $100. And these are 200 something if you can even get them in stock anywhere. It's pretty hard to find them. So that was my thought anyway, was, well, I knew the Sonys were better. I just didn't realize that the Galaxy Buds were number 2, but I will hold on to them for a little while longer, wait on the E10 and see what kind of the first reviews are, see if, for armatures and a dynamic driver sound better than those guys. Amazon released their Alexa Buds, whatever they're called, Echo Buds. Same thing. No one's actually tried the sound, and unless it sounds better than the Galaxy Buds, I'm gonna wait that out. This morning, Bad Guy Good Reviews threw out his top 5 Chi-Fi not low budget, but budget earphones. Surprisingly on the list, number 1, the Blonde O3s. These guys, had mine for a couple days, still wrapped, still haven't tried them at all. Thinking I want to get to those this weekend. I mean, now that I wrapped up the ZSX, I think I want to spend some time with these guys since he ranked them as number 1. And like I said in other videos, people haven't stopped talking about these things. So I'm kind of looking forward to giving those a shot. But in case you woke up and saw his listing, the O3s were number 1, which was cool. Number 5, I think, was the V90s. My V90s they were in New York yesterday. I'm not sure where they are today. They're making their way to me. Still don't have them. I don't even think they're going to be delivered today, but number 5, and I think there was a guide ray and the SIM card, and I don't remember. There's maybe in the middle 2. I don't remember the other one. Oh, that $20 Venture Electronics one, which we talked about last time. I don't know, people talking about them, but not nearly as much as the Blondes. So. Other thing people were talking about, the Shozi's Form 1.1s are actually being released soon. I actually read a review of it this morning, and he actually mentioned when it was being released, and I don't remember. It's really soon, maybe in a week or so. He basically said had an elevated treble and a small soundstage and super fast bass. The decay is super short. Said it was good for country, jazz, and some classical. So I think we're going to move these off the list because I don't listen to any of those music types. But if those are your thing, then look up the Shozi Form 1.1 soon. I think he mentioned it was going to be on drop.com at a reduced price. Instead of $75, it was $60, maybe, somewhere around there. I don't remember. I stopped kind of reading after I read what music genres it was well suited towards. So back to the ZSX, and like I mentioned in my first impression, and this isn't going to go horribly off from my first impressions, was I probably love it a little more than my first impression after using it. But so one, cable is huge on the ZSX. Did not use the stock cable. This is actually the stock cable. If you read a review, and some guy posted this last night, he said, how come so many reviews call it a side grade from the ZS10? That is because of this. I don't know why it degrades so much on the ZSX, whereas it didn't really on the ZS10 Pro, but if you have another cable, please try that. I went through that, the original stock. This is the pink gold. This is from the ZSN, the purple special edition one. Okay, not really any better than that guy, so I didn't use that guy. This is the gold and silver KZ upgrade cable, like the official one. Actually really good. Not as good as the 16 core copper. The bass is not as overwhelming on this guy. It's sort of toned down. This is probably a good mid version for most people. If you're like some bass but not crazy bass, check out the gold and silver cable. I was just talking about this to I think on my other video. Some guy just ordered it, and I said, yep, still highly rated. If you look at Hakuzen's thread, he said it's kind of a great deal and the best upgrade cable KZ has kind of officially released. So, yep, tried it on the ZSX, works fine, much better than the stock cable. So, if you're looking for a kind of a sure bet upgrade, gold and silver KZ upgrade cable, I don't know if it's $9, $10, it's kind of in that ballpark. But the one I have been using is the 16 core, nice HCK, copper cable, super nice looking. You could usually tell this one, it's got the carbon fiber wrap around the actual plug. Some guy asked why using a 2-pin instead of the QDC, which is a lot easier to deal with. So the whole trick, and you can kind of see it here, is the blue dot shows you polarity. And on KZs, the rule of thumb is it points towards the back of your head or the back of the earbud, however you want to say it. So yes, it's more of a pain to deal with because you have to make sure you have the orientation right, but it's not all that difficult when you understand that red is the right earbud, the blue goes towards the back, and you kind of stick to that general rule. And then you can test it. There's some audio phase testing on, I think, Audio Checks or Audio Test. One of those two has a phase test, and you can just double check that in phase sounds like the sounds in front of you, out of phase sounds like it's in your head or right behind you, and then you kind of know that you've got it all right. So for my first impression, I said these things are pretty awesome. And I will kind of stick with that and say that my final judgment is that these things just kind of represent the best that KZ has ever really put out. Not so much because it's the best components or the most expensive or the nicest finish or any of that stuff, but the whole package itself just got everything right. And that's something that typically KZ hasn't really done. There's always been, if you look at my reviews, there's always something. Whether it's the bass or the mids or the vocals or female vocals, there's always like one sticking point. It's kind of like that when I mentioned about the Shozy. It's all great except for the treble is elevated and it gets fatiguing and it sounds sparkly and high. Okay, so that's kind of a problem because now you don't have the whole package, and then he's going through the EQ trying to get it back into something he can tolerate. But that is sort of what I found special about the ZSX, was this wasn't the case where I'm going through a playlist and saying, oh, that sounds okay, this sounds not okay. Prince, When Doves Cry sounds okay. Purple Rain, not okay. Just not the case. And I saw this yesterday. Some guy was, not yesterday, the other day, he was trying out Campfire Audio's Andromedas, I think. And he's like, the singer from Disturbed, his voice is just a little higher than it should be. He's got a really low growl voice. And on the Campfires, it's just a little higher. And it's like, yeah, those guys just, they tune for this, the Shozy case, where to really show true audio reproduction, people always turn to jazz. You know, does every instrument sound flawless? And that's what those guys tune to. That's not Disturbed, that's not Lady Gaga, not popular genres. So if you're going to go spend that money, you kind of understand that that's not a flaw, but that's how they tune. Not the case with these guys. I mean, I just couldn't really find, it was so rare to do a review where I just kind of went through the playlist and kept on going through it. Like, there's got to be something that doesn't really sound right, natural, or whatever. So when we get to the actual sound, there isn't so much a flaw, but the one part where the ZSX is lacking is bass definition. And does that bother me? Not so much, because I don't listen to a whole lot of jazz or standing upright basses or that type of music. You know, if you really want a defined, precise bass, you're probably not going to get it on any ZSX, because they all tend to be slower, warmer, more popular music bass sounds, EDM sounds, than a traditional jazz trio, where you want to hear the guy plucking and the decay is exactly the decay of an upright bass, but not so much a KZX thing or a KZ thing, I mean. So whether you call the bass flappy or flabby or overwhelming, whatever, it all works for me. I think with this cable, you get a super thick bass, and that extends up into the mids. If you want something not as beefy, the gold and silver was kind of what I would go with. But for me, if you listen to some rap, EDM, you really want to hear thick bass, get yourself a thick copper cable, because that's kind of where they shine. So that's sort of the low point, is the bass. Is it a low point for normal people who like a whole lot of bass? No. But I just thought I'd mention it. If you're shy away from being a bass head, you know, change your cable or change your tips, and that'll remedy that part. So when you get up into the mids and the treble is kind of where KZ never really did it, not right, but just never sounded natural. And the ZSX is kind of the first time where you're hearing some instruments just sound a lot more natural, especially drums and percussion. Always sound better than the ZS10. And by better, I mean they actually sound like the instruments. Everything is natural. And I think people said the tone is a lot more natural. And I think between balance and natural are probably the two words that'll be most associated with the ZSX, because it's so unlike any other KZs. And so at the same time, I also had the TFZs, and people are kind of wondering, so in the past, especially on the ZS10 and before, so what did spending $100 get you that KZ never really did? And the TFZ number 3 is that whole package. From the highs to the mids to the lows, everything sounds in balance. And that was something that was really hard to do on a KZ style. But that was what, you know, paying double the price bought you. And what I'll say is, so now that you have a KZ that is awesome sounding from the lows to the highs, what does the TFZ do that this guy doesn't? And it is the bass. This thing, when you hear the kick drum, it's not like there's so much more bass. It's probably the same amount, but the definition on the TFZ is just always going to be a little better. And do you notice that? If you've only had KZs, you come from a ZSN or a ZSX, and you hear a kick drum. It sounds kind of like a kick drum until you hear it on a better set. You're like, oh, that is definitely a kick drum. And that was kind of the one thing that I noticed the most is that the percussive instruments on the TOZ sound amazing, better than anything else I have, including the ZSX. So, do you want to spend $100 on this guy versus $40 or $50 on this guy? Up to you. I don't think there's any doubt that this guy will always rate higher because of that one trait, that across the spectrum, it just sounds, everything sounds more natural, including the bottom. So that was kind of my thing about the TFZ was, yeah, the ZXX, the bass still isn't number 3 quality, but close. And for daily listening, close enough for me. I mean, it's really, really good. So the second thing that we talked about on the first impression was the Soundstage. And I'm going to say that the Soundstage is really close to the ZS10 Pro, but you just get better definition. And I think it's this combination of everything. Now you have the bass matching the treble, matching the mids. Nothing is stomping over the one another. So the Soundstage sounds, I think most people say it sounds a little wider, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's not, we can't really measure. You can't say, oh, it's like 3 inches wider now. But it's still wide. The ZS10 was wide as well. But now you get better sounding instruments with that same imaging, and everything just sounds better. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to say that the Soundstage is wider or deeper, but I will say it sounds better because the instrument imaging is actually slightly better. Maybe that's just simply because the resolution or the tone or, whatever the adjective you want to throw on an instrument sounding more like the actual instrument. Better resolution on that means, a better Soundstage. So, and I think that was the other thing that maybe I didn't mention on the first impression was details and resolution, right? Is this really any better than the ZS10 as far as, is there a lack of resolution? People were kind of throwing around, well, there's a lack of definition and resolution on the ZSX. And I think that's primarily targeted towards the bass. On the treble and the mids, I mean, I think if you listen to Dido's Hurricanes or any other soft female male vocal, I think there's a ton of detail there. Better than anything else at $40. So maybe the blondes will, do better on that. But for me right now, this week, I don't have any problems on the detail on these guys at all, and I think it's pretty superb for the price of them. So I think when you read that in other reviews, I think that's sort of what they were talking about is, yeah, this is not your jazz trio plucking bass, hearing all that stuff. But as far as hearing people breathe and hearing the echoes and the airiness of vocals, all that is there on the ZSX. Hasn't changed since the ZS10, and it just sounds more natural because the higher end is now extended. So especially the female vocals and the instruments, all sound better at that end. So I think that's about it. I mean, I think, as I said, my first impression, I loved it. I loved it more after continuing to listen to it. Highly recommended. Not too much more to say about it. It's probably, the best KZ. And I think if you read the KZ HeadFi, KZ impression thread, people are kind of coming around saying, yeah, it's something special for KZ to have the complete package where people aren't nitpicking anything other than bass definition. And as long as you understand that, I think it's kind of a blockbuster for me. So until next time, maybe we'll talk about the Blonde 03, or maybe my V90s will actually arrive. And so we'll talk then. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.